Part of what we've tried to do over the last few years has been to help nurture a network of people who care and are interested in trying to contribute to improvement. And Owen's leadership of the Infuse programme is the most visible part of that, and that continues. But we hope that this is an initiative that will continue to develop the relationships necessary to deliver public innovation in South East Wales and in Wales and beyond. And in that sense, this is a moment, if you will, in time, because this will be the last of the events that the Challenge Fund team organises as we wind down. And I did want to take the opportunity, just very quickly on the part of Kev and myself, to thank Carla again and Cheryl, who've been, I think, Kev, I can say, the two best colleagues we could have possibly worked with in the university. And Nadia, I don't think is here, but I also want to record my thanks to her. But also, I don't know if Gareth's still here, but Gareth Browning was the person from CCR that we worked with in the initial phases of developing the fund, and he was a great colleague to work with. And Owen has been a fantastic person to work with over this last period. And I'll return to something that Owen said about what the future might look like and what we hope we may be able to be part of, and we hope you will be part of in a couple of moments' time. So I'm going to try and draw out a few personal reflections on what we've heard, which, given it's lunchtime, I won't be able to do justice to what we've heard, but I'll pull out a couple of things that I think are quite important, and also just say a little bit about what we've learned through the period of time when we've been undertaking the Challenge Fund. And you're on the table, you'll see these sheets which record some of the numbers. And of course, we live in a world where you've got to count things to show that you've done anything valuable. But the point I want to close on in a couple of moments is that it's much more than the numbers that are going to be important for the future that we're trying to craft together in the Cardiff capital region. I want to start with a point that Ravi and I discussed during his presentation around what do we need to retain in focus if we're going to maintain the integrity of a missions approach. And I think we heard from Kev and from Ravi some of the key factors there. The commitment to developing approaches that create social value as well as commercial value and opportunity. And I think Ravi rightly said we need to prioritise a small number of disruptively ambitious goals if we're going to retain that missions approach in focus. And of course, throughout this morning, we've heard about the importance of collaboration. I'm not a huge fan of the term quadruple helix either, but it captures what I think is important about working across sectors. And certainly in our own experiences with the Challenge Fund, we've benefited from and worked hard to try and ensure that we've built the sorts of relationships necessary across sectors to help us deliver. And, you know, the Belfast presentation from Alistair in particular gave some granularity to the nature of those relationships. So building of relationships has been very important. As Ravi said, missions, if they're going to be disruptive, can appear quite daunting in terms of what does this mean? And that's why we've coined the term micro-missions, where we try and convert the larger scale ambition and work with partners to identify something that they can recognise themselves in as an activity, so that you can try and turn the large and abstractly ambitious into some things that people can see the benefits for and can identify in and feel a degree of commitment to. And that means that we need to spend time listening and working collectively to develop a sense of a shared agenda. And that means we need to tailor our approaches, as you've heard from Ravi and others this morning. And those things take at least two dimensions that are important. They take time, so we need to have some patience. We need to work through an understanding of what we can try and achieve collaboratively and collectively. And I made this point in one of our previous events. That need for patience runs up against the urgency of some of the problems that we face. So there's a tension there between acting and being seen to act on the one hand, but taking the time necessary to develop an understanding and the relationships. and to build trust. So the second T, time and trust, I think are crucial in being able to turn our aspirations into meaningful action that brings our, as Ravi put it, mobilises all parts of society around these undertakings. Now, Kev and I were talking yesterday in anticipation of me saying a few words about the importance of cross-sectoral collaboration, which we might label the horizontal dimension. And we haven't touched on this a great deal this morning, but Dan Bristow, who had to leave, asked a question earlier that pointed to this. The vertical dimension of operating, particularly in Northern Ireland or in Wales or in Scotland, but actually when we talk to our colleagues in the mayoral authorities of England as well, the vertical dimension of multi-level governance and navigating and operating our way through that complex context where, frankly, the relationships between the levels and between the key actors in those levels is not where it needs to be, where it should be, to provide people like you and hopefully us with a sufficiently clear and firm foundation to try and get on and do good things. So Kev and I will certainly continue to raise those issues where we can. It's you know, the Industrial Strategy Green Paper recognises some of the challenges of devolution in England and kind of has something nice will happen in Scotland and Wales as well, and I'm not even sure Northern Ireland's mentioned at all. So we have to keep flying the flag of the specific place-based contexts that we're all operating in, and that recognition means it's important to I think work with the notion of an ecosystem. And we heard the Belfast guys who gave a great representation of what that ecosystem means in their context. And some of you will have heard me say this before. When we think about the ecosystem, I think we need to think about a number of components of that ecosystem if we're trying to work towards a fully functioning missions approach. And I like to refer to the 4 C's that I think Cardiff Capital Region's innovation strategy needs to embrace. And that's the focus on the comparative advantage we have in a small number of clusters, yes. The development of bounded interventions that I call catalysts, that the Challenge Fund would be an example. But there are 2 other C's that often, I think, get ignored that are going to be particularly important for us if we're going to navigate our way out of some of the problems that we face. And that's the innovation commons. They're the raw materials and ingredients of future innovation, skills, data, connectivity that we need to nurture and invest in. And also capacity, absorptive capacity. In strategic management, absorptive capacity is the ability to understand, recognise and understand new knowledge, interpret that, assimilate it, and then act upon it. And that, for me, is what's crucial about this community of practice, this network, where we try and nurture that capability to understand, interpret, and apply new knowledge as part of our innovation journey. And actually, in the context of that conversation, I think we heard another C, confidence. And that, I think, is part of what this network hopes to provide. A safe space, a home for these conversations where we can share. Brilliant presentation from the Caerphilly guys about what they've learned through trialling, experimenting, iterating. Share those lessons, the things that haven't worked quite as well, and the positive story that makes us understand that it's still worthwhile trying. We heard from Zoe and Tom a very encouraging story about working our way through some of the obstacles to get to where we want to get to. And so a couple of final comments then in terms of taking the agenda forward. Ravi and Rachel echoed this point about humility, to know and acknowledge what we don't know is a crucial start point. But I think we also have to, as I've just said, couple that with some confidence. So there's an interesting dilemma for us. Humility, but some confidence to take a risk, to be willing to experiment and fail and learn from that experimentation. So as we look to the future, and I hope that what we've contributed to, with our multiple partners, particularly the CCR, are some of those foundations that will allow us to be successful as we look to the future. And so, while there are we're beginning to see some encouraging numbers, I think it's much more about laying those foundations with the sorts of relationships that we've begun to build so that we can move forward as players, not spectators. Thank you very much.